Let's get started with this. This is the webinar, Ask the Experts About the Year of the Pea. This is our year of crop for edibles this year. And I'm Diane Blazek. I'm with National Garden Bureau. If you guys see a lot of cool links coming up in chat, that's Gail from our office, and she's going to be providing a lot of additional information. But first, what I want to do is I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, our experts, and then I'm going to give them the chance to tell us a little bit more about themselves and their companies. So right now we have Ellie from Pure Line Seeds, we have Heather from Cicada Seeds, and we have Janine from Syngenta Seeds. So obviously seed companies. So let's go back. And Ellie, you're a first-time panelist, so we are really extending a welcome out to you. But would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your company?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ellie Boda with Pure Line Seeds. We are located, our seed production facility in Washington State, Warden, and Pure Line has been in the business for over 75 years. I am the research director in 3 breeding programs. We have peas, beans, and edamame. So if you have follow-up questions on any of these crops, you're welcome to contact me later on. I have a PhD in breeding from Washington State University, and I have been in this area for about 18 years in the breeding field. But I'm here to tell about cool facts as well, not just to give a boring presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. That's what this is all about. It's a lot of cool facts. In fact, we have a webinar coming up in May, and the entire thing is cool facts about horticulture. So for all of our webinar participants here, you might want to register for that one. That one's going to be fun. So, but back to our panelists. Heather from Cicada, welcome back.
Hi, I'm Heather Kibble. I've been with Cicada about 14 years. I'm a salesperson. I sell wholesale to companies that provide seed to the home gardener and the farm market grower. So we have all kinds of interesting things, and peas are a personal favorite of mine. So I think it's going to be fun.
And within Cicada, your division, the brand for your, I don't want to say it because I'll
homegrown.
Homegrown.
Yeah, yes. Our division is called homegrown.
Yeah. Excellent.
We focus on local growers.
Very good. Okay, and Janine.
Hi, I'm Janine. I'm a 37-year veteran of the flower and seed industry. It's been a long journey for me, and I'm still here, and I'm still enjoying myself, because when you work with plant breeders and industry folks, you just can't help but get excited, especially when you get a chance to get out in the fields and actually look at these wonderful varieties being developed. I'm in sales and marketing currently. I manage the wholesale portfolio for our vegetable division, and it's just a lot of fun picking out all the cool stuff to bring into the home garden space and for market growers. What's really nice about it is that these are the same varieties that your professional growers are using. So it's more than likely you've actually eaten a lot of this product in the grocery stores, and you just don't know it, that where it comes from. It could be any of these 3 companies here. So anyway, I'm looking forward to having some fun with you guys talking about peas today.
Excellent, excellent. And just as an FYI, I'm just going to gradually go through our PowerPoint. We wanted to put some enticing pea photos up here. So at some point, somebody might have a question about one of them, or one of our panelists might say, okay, here's an interesting fact about this particular variety of pea. But I like to start off our webinars, and I'm going to kind of preface or set the setting a little bit. So for our panelists, let's say that you are at a non-industry cocktail party. It's whatever the case might be, and somebody says, oh, what do you do for a living? And you explain to them, and you explain your expertise. What might be one of the main questions that you get about growing peas, and how do you answer that question? Either one of you can go first. It doesn't matter.
I guess I can go first then. So for me, it's a little bit different. So they will ask what I do for a living. I'll say, I make babies, pea babies. And then everybody laughs, what, and I work with genetics of peas, this amazing crop. And we have different stages, different types of peas, different maturities. So it can be a whole night conversation. So it always keeps interesting. And one of the questions people ask a lot, when it's about why or when to plant peas, and there is a lot of discussion that in follow-up questions, but why? One is the main crop that we study before genetics. So Mendel in 1800s already start working on peas. So easy, straightforward genetics. It's beautiful. You can see its segregation. It's science happening then. And two, is delicious, right? So everybody likes the taste of pea. Good for you, good for the environment, for nitrogen, making protein for yourself, cheapest source of protein ever from the crops, right? That we are considering breeding. There's other sources too, non-processed. And low water usage leaves nitrogen for the next crop. So beautiful. That's my main question. Why? Why peas?
I love that when you say you make babies. I remember I was actually traveling with a flower breeder from Syngenta, and we were at a public garden, and we walked in, and one of his zinnias was on display, and he just threw up his hands and he goes, "My baby!" So I understand you breeders are producing new babies all the time, and you're quite passionate about it, I guess. Okay, Heather or Janine, what's one of the questions people ask you about peas?
I think the thing that I get a lot is like people are so anxious to garden in the spring, and they got tomatoes and peppers on their mind. And you have to remind them that the conditions aren't really there yet for the warm season crops, that they need to focus in on cool season crops. And peas are one of the easiest things to grow in the early spring. And as soon as that soil is workable, you can pretty much go out there and start putting your peas in. And it's just not in-ground gardening, it's also for container gardening, and peas are excellent in a container. And a lot of times in the early spring, you're just not ready to go out there and do some heavy duty work out in the garden. You want to ease into it, but you have a container nearby. And if you just go in there and poke your peas in about 1 inch apart, water it in and just let them go. And you'll have this beautiful container, and the pea flowers are very beautiful on their own also. And then you get that fruit, and don't get the wet feet issues that you do in a wet soil in early spring. So that's the thing I like to advise people is like go to a container situation, especially for early spring, and don't be afraid to plant peas.
Excellent. Okay, and Heather.
I think the only thing I would have to add is because they're so early, they're good for kids because kids can handle the seeds. They're easy to see and plant and work with. And they're also excellent for school gardens because a lot of the time the school gardens are trying to get their crop before they all graduate and go home for the summer, right? So a lot of the time it's difficult to get things that are planted and can be harvested in the time that they have to work with the kids. So this is one that I would recommend.
I love that. Yeah. And we've got some chat going on here about planting them, and the peas don't even make it into the house because the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're so yummy.
Which I love that. That's great. Yeah. Okay. So one of my first questions was about the timing of peas. And I know you've all kind of touched on that. You guys are, for the most part, on the West Coast. We talked a little bit earlier. We've got Alberta, Canada. We have Texas. So let's not talk about months. Let's talk about temperatures. And is there the ability to succession plant? Can you do spring and fall? And we're going to have to kind of cover the entire North American continent in your answers. But if you can kind of start to address that.
Do you want me to go first too?
It doesn't matter.
So peas are, as you mentioned before, a cool season food legume. So they can tolerate some coldness, and the minimum temperature that they require to grow daily is 40 Fahrenheit. So my soil, if I always measure the temperature in the soil, if it's at least 40 or 45, it's good to go. Peas are in two big different categories. We have winter or autumn sown peas, and we have spring peas, or the ones that we plant in the summer. So as long as you pick your right variety, and that's why we have this beautiful catalog passing through. So if you have, a favorite pick, you gotta ask more informations about it. Some are cold hardy, very good for, winter sown, and some are not. So I plant peas all year round, inside, in pots, in the greenhouse, outside in the winter. They go before this started too. We talk about dormancy, and we can follow up on that. So the winter peas, they go to not the seed, but they go to a period of sleeping before they bloom in spring. So that's depending on the variety, I would say. You can plant peas year round.
In certain climates.
Certain climates, yeah.
Yeah. And they are cool season vegetables. And I think, we kind of, when the temperatures get warm, it's really about when they flower. And you want them to flower under cool conditions. And when it gets warm, then you don't get the fruit set that you expect. So if you want to do a fall planting for most of your typical garden varieties, you want to do it at late summer so that by the time they flower, you're going into those cool temperatures and you'll get better fruit set that way for a fall planting. So that helps. So, but you can plant spring and fall.
Okay, so I'm going to toss out one of the questions we already got here, and I am not going to be able to pronounce this. I'll mangle it if I do. But Margaret says, I'm working with a couple of Indonesian recipes that call for mangetout. So do you guys know about a growing option for that, for an edible pea pod?
We will have to
No.
get back to you as far as, in our company, we don't work with that type, but
Okay.
we are glad to follow up.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, well, we got the first stumper question, and we'll research it, and we will put that in the follow-up email. And then here's another follow-up question. How does the average home gardener determine varieties that are suitable for spring or fall or winter sowing?
Should be part of the catalog description. So if you're looking at an online catalog, the seed companies are fantastic about providing all kinds of information about when and how to grow things. So be sure and check the website. If you're working with a seed packet, again, all that information should be on the back of the seed packet, but they have not quite the space there. So sometimes I'll buy a packet of seed and not have quite what I'm looking for. So I'll look online at the online catalog description should have that information about when to plant.
Yeah, and many varieties are dual purpose where they'll fit both seasons.
Yeah.
When I know as a portfolio person, I'm really looking at that from a consumer perspective as to making sure that I have the right product that's appropriate for all different levels of gardeners out there. And you want to make it as easy as possible. So you do want to focus in on varieties that are more dual purpose that can fit in both the cool seasons.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, we got a whole chat going on here. The terminology for that is eat all. So it's eating the entire pod. So that's okay. So we kind of did that. We talked, are peas actually frost tolerant? You had said that the soil temperature needs to be 40 degrees. So what about when they start to grow and if your temperatures drop down to 30 or 32?
Excellent question. So you can push that temperature, and either if they are a winter design variety, they go dormant. But then the soil temperature changes again, it wake up again, and it can trigger disease in the soil, one of your pots, or poor germination. So there's a lot of problems that will come if you don't reach that minimum 40 that they need to grow every single day. So I have a bunch of my company co-workers here showing the chat. And again, we calculate heat units to put in the catalogs because of that. We are in the knowledge that at least 40 every day for the pea to continue grow healthy. But again, if it's a potted variety, Janine maybe can talk more about that. You can move your pots if it gets too cold, or you can throw a blanket, or you can have a strategy if you're a home gardener.
And that's a good point about the containers. They're very flexible, and you can put them in a protected area if conditions turn on you real quick.
That's a good point, because one of my next questions was going to be about sunlight. And I know we just had a webinar a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about, when you're planting things early spring before the trees have leafed out, you have a lot more usable space in your yard, because what might be shade in the summer, in the early spring will be sunny. So can you guys talk a little bit about that, about how much light they need? And then Janine, I know you're passionate about containers, so any tips there about positioning your containers?
Full sun. I mean, most vegetables like full sun, and the more sun you can give them, the better. Especially in the early spring. We're not like summer sun, so they can take as much as you can give them. I see a comment here about Snack Hero and hanging baskets. I love peas in hanging baskets. And when I first started playing with peas in hanging basket, people thought I was kind of a little bit crazy in the greenhouses where I work. But another person came through who's very much like Ellie here on the breeding side. And they're like, this is like the perfect environment for a pea. It dries out, you get that fluctuation, you get really good air movement around the plant. There's plenty of room for it to grow in there. The nice thing too about peas is they're compatible with other cool season. If you wanted to throw some flowers in there, like a pansy, a little viola in there, and then you got little edible flowers if you like, things along those lines. But there's a great picture of a pea in a container, but they adapt so well to containers. But hanging baskets are a really great environment for them also.
And
Full
this,
sun.
sorry,
Yeah,
Janine.
go ahead.
This particular variety here, Peas in a Pod Bernard, it's beautiful because it's petite, so you can grab the pod, and when you do your salads, it's gonna be little tiny peas, if you are into doing culinary arts, that's a good one to go with. Was just mentioned the light intensity, it really changed. Again, cool season, it doesn't need the hottest, don't plant in the hottest months. Because it doesn't do too well. In our greenhouse, we have two intensities of light. One that trees grow well. If it gets too hot, we move them underneath so they get some shade. So they like full sun, but it's adding to sun and temperature can be tricky there. I don't know if Heather has any other inputs on that regard.
I think you guys covered it.
Okay, we have, I'm wanting to talk about different types of peas and some culinary uses and everything. Somebody is asking if you have to inoculate the peas.
Excellent question. So peas, they need to associate with a good microorganism, rhizobia, in order to fix nitrogen. We don't need to add much nitrogen if that rhizobia is in there. But if they are in a poor condition, a poor soil, or you don't know if your garden has anything, if you're growing a sandbox, maybe you need to add inoculant. It would benefit, or if your soil is not in the greatest conditions. But if you're planting outside and you do different crops, you shouldn't be required to, but you give it a boost for sure.
Okay, so now let's talk about the different types of peas. We've already kind of been dabbling there, but overall in our year of, we had listed different types of peas. So who wants to tackle that one?
I can get started on that. So I would think 3 major classifications is what we use anyway. So snow peas would be the flat podded type where the pea has not yet developed within the pod and you're eating the whole pod. And then there are sugar snap peas that you eat the whole pod. The seeds have started to develop and maybe they're not starchy yet. They should still be sweet and not too fibrous. Because you're going to eat the whole pod. And then the third type would be a shelling pea that you're growing not for the pod, but just for the peas that are inside. So that's like traditionally what your grandma bought in or grew and put in cans or freezer, or you see them in pot pie or as a side dish in the spring. I know at Easter that's a popular one for fresh eating.
So here's one of the questions that I had. I mean, like looking at this one, you see these beautiful tendrils. do all three types of these peas have the tendrils? Are you breeding for more tendrils, you know, for the culinary aspect of it? But just talk about tendrils a little bit.
So traditionally, I mean, I think all plants, and Ellie can probably answer this better than I can, but I think all pea plants have tendrils to some extent. For a while, they were a breeding focus to help the plants stand up because they would hold on to each other in a little network. So it was good to keep the plants off the ground. And then the eating is a new a new trend, I guess, eating the pea shoots and the tendrils. So yeah, in that case, we would be breeding for tendrils that are tasty too.
Yeah, I think it
This
also has
is
something to do with the type. Ellie, I'll pass this off to you in a moment, but you have the aphilotypes, which tend to have more tendrils, and then you got your standard leaf types that have fewer tendrils. So depending on what purpose that it serves. So I'll let Ellie take it from here.
sorry guys, I'm just too excited. I don't want to jump on everyone. It's just like So tendrils are modified leaflets. So the normal vine that you order in your catalog, it will have a leaflet. It's the splitted leaf on top and few tendrils, of course, Heather said, you know, to climb. That was the purpose originally. But again, then they start breeding and finding mutations and differences. And the aphilotypes with a lot of tendrils is that they function like little arms that grab into each other like hands and keep it up. So for field production, aphila is one of the very important topics right now. But also there is a modified one that it had tendrils and then it threw a lot of leaflets around. It's very cute. It's called parsley pea. I don't know if we have a picture here in the catalog, but Pure Line sells parsley pea too. And the chefs love to decorate their dishes with tendrils. If you're thinking about edibles for tendrils, as soon as they form, you can use them. But if you wait a long time to harvest your peas to then try to eat the tendril, it might be a little bit rough. That's my inputs on tendrils, but yeah, I'm very passionate about this topic. Thank you guys.
Yeah, so on the tendrils, you're saying to harvest those before the pods form? Is that what you said?
For the best tenderness, because
Okay.
the older the pea, so there is a shoot and root relationships to form the seed. So when the plant is young and growing and beautiful, like everybody, you know, in the early life, it's tender. And when the seed, after pollination, after making a baby, every energy in the plant or the goods, the sweets, it will go to the seed. The plant will put energy in the baby. So if you eat that, it's edible, but it will be more, less flavor, more rough, perhaps, depending on the variety. There's always variety specific
Sure, yeah.
changes.
You know, one of the things, Heather, when you were talking about the different types, the snow, the snap, the shelling peas, do they all have very similar planting times? Do they all have similar, you know, number of days to harvest? And what is that in a pea? You know, like an average? I know that.
Yeah. I mean, it varies quite a bit by variety. So anywhere, I think some of the earlier ones, earliest would be like 35 to 40 days, up to 55 to 70, depending on what. I think the shelling peas probably are going to be later because you're waiting for that full development on the pods. And then the snow peas are probably going to be the earliest overall because you're harvesting them so early in the cycle. And then there's, you know, variety by variety. They all differ a little bit. So be sure and check your seed catalog for that information. Because in a lot of places, it gets hot really fast, right? So if you're somewhere where that's going to happen, you want to be sure and pick out an early variety to have the best success. And if you're planting for shoots or tendrils, I don't know if we're going to talk about that more later, but that you can do early and you plant more densely, so you don't have to do the same spacing. And you're just harvesting the shoot as it comes up and not waiting for the full development on the plant. So that's another good option if you need something super quick.
So it's kind of like microgreens,
yes,
for the shoots, like
yep,
for microgreens. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to add there?
No.
Okay. Let's hear. You're answering my questions very well, but we have something in the chat. Do peas self-pollinate? Do they need pollination?
Yes, they self-pollinate. So that's the beauty of it. You don't need to be worrying about mama, mama and dada. You just, after we develop, you guys can just relax.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. The other thing to think about is like bees themselves, there needs to be a certain temperature threshold in order for them to be able to fly. I believe it's 55 degrees. And I know out here in California where I live, if I do any heavy duty gardening involving deadheading and stuff, I got to get out before the temperature hits 55 because then the bees show up. I'm racing the bees a lot of times. But because these are cool season crops, and as Ellie pointed out, 40 degrees, and if you're growing 40 to 50 degrees, the bees aren't going to be out there anyway. So they really do need to be self-pollinating in order to survive. The pea needs to survive.
Excellent. Okay. So we've kind of dabbled on this, like, the pea shoots and the tendrils and the number of days to harvest. I'm going to ask you for your tips on harvesting the different types of peas, how to harvest. And also I have a question, and I'm not sure what plant we were talking about the other day, but there's a lot of vegetables that they benefit from frequent harvesting. So let's talk about harvesting, but I also want to know, like, how many do I plant to get a decent harvest? I mean, I'm going to eat a heck of a lot more than like 6 pea pods. So I want enough for a meal. So talk about harvest, talk about how much to plant and what kind of productivity or yield you're going to get off your peas. Somebody.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I don't want to dominate the webinar.
Yeah, I just want to say I just plant as many as I can. Just half the time they don't make it out of the garden. You're out there, doing your tasks and like you're just nibbling on them as you go along. But I mean, for containers, I would do at least 5 to 6 containers out there just to have a really nice steady supply of product coming in.
So for us here, we can do in pots, like a gallon pot, we can put 3, 5 seeds in it. If you're doing a row, you put how many as you want. As Janine said, you can give a spacing like from 1.5 to 2.5 inches in between. That would be fine. It would do well, in my opinion here. You might have a crowded crop with less productivity. But my sales team that are in the chat can help with that commercially. Harvest, so 1 seed for me here at the greenhouse, 1 seed of my varieties can average anywhere from 60 seeds to like 150 seeds. So the variety productivity is also dependent on what you're planting. Make sure you irrigate and not too much, because then you can cause rot and that will drop your yield. So there's a lot of little factors, but you can play and see what works for you on your location.
Like everything with gardening, it is an experiment.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so give us a few tips on actual harvesting, yank them off, cut them off, but what's the best way, and is it different for the different types of peas?
I like to use the little tiny garden shears, the blades like about this long. I don't know what the technical term for this is, but, and I snip them because it just seems too mean to pull the plant over and be too rough. If you are going to do that, then use both hands so that you're not tearing the whole plant up. But that's just me. I don't know if that's.
I use little snips too.
Yeah.
Little
Sorry, we here in the field, sometimes we yank them off.
Yeah.
Sorry, Heather, we yank and they're still good. They taste good.
Yeah.
Eat right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You just harvest and eat, or you can harvest and freeze. You can harvest and store in the refrigerator for a while, for a few
Especially,
days.
yeah, if you're harvesting the whole plant at once, like you're doing a whole row and you're gonna, you're not expecting more peas from that plant, then that would make sense.
But if you're a big gardener there, and there's some viners that you can put peas, the whole plant through, and it will separate the pods for you.
Mhm.
You can buy at Amazon. Well, last time I looked, it's less than $200. But I can't guarantee you you can find one now.
Let's see, it looks like we've got a question. We've got several questions. What type of soil is best for the peas grown in containers?
Standard potting mix, you know.
Yeah, they're
Just-
not real picky, right?
No, peas aren't real picky.
Excellent.
Yeah,
And
just a
the
standard
potting
mix.
mix, yeah, we add the Osmocote if you
Yeah,
don't want to do sales or anything, but that's a slow release fertilizer just in case if you're not sure if your potting mix comes with all the nutrition, if you want to have higher yields, or again, it's a nitrogen fixation legume, but the problem is the potting mix sometimes they don't have any source of rhizobia, the good microorganisms. So, we just add some Osmocote in there.
Okay, so that's for containers, and now because we're already getting some questions popping up about in-ground soil. So how do you prep your soil? What kind of additives do you recommend soil tests? Somebody's asking about the ideal pH to grow peas. Lots of questions about soil.
I love that. So I'll follow up on that for now, and then I can pass on. So the rhizobia works in a medium pH. It doesn't like a low pH of 5 and doesn't like a 7 pH. So there is, if you are relying on inoculant without what's in the soil without adding any nutrition to your peas, you need to check your pH. Micronutrients are good to check if you're doing a long row. If you want to do garden super right, we always test the soil here just to see the profile. Some zinc is like a vitamin. If it's present in the soil, you give it a boost, initial boost. But in essence, we don't really need much for peas. If you're just in our area, you're just first gardening there, just throw your peas in there and they will grow. But if you want to be, like professional gardener, you do soil tests of micronutrients, you check your pH, not too low, not too high, and amendments. But peas can be directed planted. So if you don't even want to plow or, work your soil, you can just open a row and put right after, if you've had corn before or if its soil is rough, there's a lot of direct planting. And we have done that too. And they grow. That's the good thing.
Okay, anybody else want to add that before I start asking more specific questions about soil?
yeah,
So compost, I was going to
Yeah.
mention, for a home gardener, compost usually is sufficient. They're not they're not needy plants, as we've mentioned. So in my garden, I just well-worked soil with compost turned into it.
yeah, that's what I was going to mention is I take my fall leaves and put them on my bed and put them in, and then that's usually enough to get the early stuff going. Just throw a little, I like to use cow manure, but throw a little nitrogen in there and they're set.
And somebody is asking if you recommend organic fertilizers. I think that's the question.
There are benefits on all. I like the systemic that Janine and Heather said, like composting. So you know where your source is, it's organic, you gotta break down a little bit. So compost is number one. Organic fertilizers we use a lot too. So if you're looking for a vitamin boost like zinc, for example, there are companies that sell product that is from organic form. I don't know the regulations. Whoever is asking if it's a professional gardener, then we can follow up on the regulations. But if it's for your consumption, I think if you have control where the soil amendment or where your composting, your nutrients are coming from, you should be good.
Yeah, I think personally I like to use organic fertilizers in there, but because of the formulation, it's a lower, it's just the numbers are lower, like 5, rather than you see things that are like 15, 15, 15. So I feel like it's more controllable for managing the plant growth, but it's just basically because of the formulation. The plant itself it just sees nitrogen, phosphorus, it sees the nutrients. It doesn't recognize them as being organic or not. It just knows it's nitrogen. It doesn't know where it came from. So I think a lot of times it's just a personal preference in the gardening style of what you choose to do. But I think everyone just needs to make that choice for themselves and do what makes them feel good and what makes their garden happy, so, but the plant itself doesn't know the difference between nitrogen from one source or another.
Right. So I have another question about plant timing. We had talked about that. So somebody in zone 5A, I want to plant peas for a fall harvest. So let's just come up with a date of October 15th might be the first frost. So do they count back for days to harvest? And if they get a first frost, will those peas just kind of disintegrate? Or will they be able to harvest if it's not too hard of a frost? So there's a lot of questions in that one question.
And a lot of types. So are we snow peas, shelling peas,
Yeah.
or sugar snap? I think each of those is going to be a little bit different depending on the frost date. Like a shelling pea, a light frost on a shelling pea is probably not going to hurt it, but snow peas, yeah, it might be pulp.
Okay.
Even though they're called snow peas. I think the pods are more delicate, so that could be trickier. But yeah, you would count backwards, but it also kind of depends on how hot it is. I don't know.
And
Before,
they will stop development. So if it is a true winter type, you want it like your October 15 sounds like a good average date you picked up. Because you want them to be a little tall before the first frost. You don't want to put your seed and let it underground because they can rot. There's a lot of microorganisms in the soil. But even that, like Heather said, there's a lot of varieties. So there's varieties that do not tolerate, being, they don't go dormant, so they're gonna just continue and die. But there are some that do. We are trying to, at Pure Line, we are trying to sort it out, which lines are good, and we'll come up with a good number for you on which ones to plant and when for winter hardiness.
I'd say my other suggestion for that is succession planting, do a trial. Do some succession planting, plant every week or every 2 weeks and write down, keep track of that, and then you'll have the answer for future years.
And be tracking which varieties you're planting. Some of them might be doing, or the types. We talked about that. So yeah, that's
yeah.
And here's one I'm sure we've all heard. And she's in zone 5 also, somebody else saying, I've always planted my spring peas on St. Patrick's Day. Unless snow is covering my garden. So that's kind of it. I've tried that. I'm in zone 5 for whatever reason. I didn't have any success. But
that's the Midwest rule of thumb. So yeah, for a big slice of the country, that's what you want to shoot for. But yeah, not if there's a lot of snow on the ground. Maybe give it a week or 2.
Exactly. Okay. I thought there was another question, but I'm trying to get through here. Oh, this question. So soil temps to germinate are about 40 to 45 degrees. At what temperature do peas start reducing production? I mean, there may be some places that go from 40 to 80 within a couple of days. But at what temperatures are the peas going, no more, it's too warm?
Then we are mentioning now about heat stress, right? And the peas. Again, we, as in research, we're trying to work with peas that will tolerate heat. But generally, let's say for us here in Washington State, if you plant peas in August, that might be too hot. So like if they are grown already, being on 100 will just, help them shut down to complete their development. But if you have over a week, hundreds temperature, but if they are not grown, you can start in a hot temperature, but eventually you will need to cool or shade like we talked at the beginning. Need to move those plants or cover up. We put shades on the fields as well sometimes. If you have in your home a small gardener, it's an option too. If you have this week is gonna be in the hundreds, it's gonna be a whole week on the hundreds, and I want to have more yields. I want to have just throw a shade there. I don't know what my peers think. I might be too a topic here.
I know this is just my own personal thing. If I'm wearing shorts, it's too warm for peas. You know, shorts and sandals, it's too warm for peas. You know, so
what temperature do you start wearing shorts, Jane?
probably upper 70s.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
So yeah, shade cloth will definitely keep it cooler, especially if you're having, I mean, we've had that, I know one year in Chicago, it reached 90 degrees and it was kind of like, wait a minute, we're barely planting peas, nothing else. And it just immediately got so warm and then it got cold again. So that was a tough year for them, but yeah, well, it is Mother Nature we're dealing with. Here's another question. We talked about the vines and the tendrils, and that kind of makes them self-supporting. But should I put a trellis there? Should I, kind of do that Florida weave like you do for tomatoes? What benefit is it, I guess, if you use a support? Is it 100% necessary? Is it recommended? Is it depend on the variety and the type?
Yes, depends on the variety and the type, depends on the height of the plant. So again, that's going to be in your description. There's we had a few pictures back where you showed a whole section of plants. Those didn't need any support. They were only, 12 inches tall, maybe very short. Others are up to like 48 or 50 inches tall. Those are going to need a nice trellis to keep them up and off the ground, because you don't want to have the plants laying on the ground because of insects and soil and everything else. That's just bad. So the whole goal is to keep those pods off of the ground so they're clean.
And it makes it easier to harvest also, right?
And yeah, so I tend to plant things that are taller and grow them on trellises when it comes to peas and beans and corn. For me, because I don't like to be sitting on the ground trying to harvest things. I'd rather have it be at eye level, or at least, waist level is easier to work on. So for a home garden, that's the case.
just as an example here, we are looking at the variety, Sugar Ann. If you trellis, it will do good, but if you don't, we still can grow it here in my farm. So if you run out of trellis, don't get desperate that your peas won't grow. And this curiosity, everybody that's looking now, this is a snap pea. A snap pea is the one that you eat the whole pod that we talked about before, and you can eat raw, and it has less fiber in the pod. And the reason why it's called the snap, in my opinion, is people told me, the old breeders, that because it makes this sound when you break in half. It's a snap. So there's no always like that one you use, you saute in Asian dishes, and this curving and flat pod that they say, but it's also edible. And the shelling, we do not eat the pods. So shelling peas, again, if the pods touch the ground, they tend to be, okay.
That's true. Yeah.
But, the sweeten is no. You gotta be careful where you're putting the pod, because everybody loves sugar, even the microorganisms. So
Yeah.
disease, again, would be attracted.
The slugs, the rabbits,
And deer,
And that was
deer.
kids.
Yes.
one of the questions we asked is, how do you keep the rabbits away from your peas?
That's another reason I have the tall varieties, because if I can keep a cage on it till it's about, 8 inches tall, it's not quite as sweet. They just love things just as they're starting to leaf out. So if I get them above rabbit height, then that increases my yield.
And that's the beauty of hanging baskets.
Yeah, yeah, and containers.
A lot of things, everyone has that hook on their porch, for
Yeah.
hanging basket in the summertime, so you can fill that in.
Yeah.
Someone's
Unless you
here
have
to ask-
deer, then the
Yeah.
deer, it just makes it eye level for
Yeah, they can stand up. Get them. Someone
Depends on
asked
your
what
pest.
peas would be good for hanging baskets. What you need to do is look for ones that have shorter vines. And usually it's stated on the packet, or you can Google it and you'll find information on how long that vine is. But usually there's vines that are 12, there's 24. I think you get anything past 24 inches, it gets a little difficult unless it hangs really nice. But not all of them hang. A lot of them want to climb up the hanger that the pea is on. So because they got their little tendrils, so they want to climb up it. So but try to get the shortest vine you can find.
Yeah, that's good. The reason I had Sugar Ann up here is I was hoping I could ask one of you to give a little history because I think the very first sugar snap pea was an AS winner and it was a breeding breakthrough. So maybe one of you can talk about that.
That's a lot of responsibility to talk about sugar, and it precedes my time. So we know that as my farm, that's a good variety that has some tolerance to the main common disease that other snaps don't do it. And again, I think the breakthrough was the pod, the mutation that makes the pod edible, because before then the peas need to be shelled, and if you chew on the pod, it's chew and hard and fibrous. And Sugar Ann, it's a different taste. If you don't have in your garden, I recommend you try, and then maybe you can help me explain better why Sugar Ann is so featured, so important. But yeah, the edible pod, the juiciness of the pod, the less cellulose, less fiber.
Yeah,
Janine, any other comments on that, or Heather?
Well, I think it was 1932 or something was the winner. So
Yeah,
that predates a lot of all of us.
Right.
A long time ago. I know like the original Rogers Company is part of the Syngenta legacy, and the brothers who developed that it was a breakthrough at the time. I'm trying to remember the history. It's been a while since I read on it, but they put a lot of work on developing these peas. But if I recall the history right, it was kind of something that just popped up one day in their breeding efforts, and they noticed it was something different, and they were able to continue on with it. But it kind of launched a new type of pea
Category. Yeah.
Exactly, a new category, right? Edible buds without the string, and yeah. So that was fun.
There's a lot of happy surprises in traditional plant breeding back in the day, I think.
There are
things that we
Oh,
love.
this is cool. Yeah.
Working for this, that we found that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A mutant shelling and snow pea. Yeah, that's good. Let's see. So I do want to talk about what happens at the end of the season. We only have 10 minutes left. So I want to talk about your tips at the end of the season. What do you do with the vines, et cetera, et cetera? And then we're going to get into last piece of advice for growing, as well as you guys, your favorite varieties for certain things. So let's talk about end of the season. The harvest is over. What do you do now?
You're sad because you don't have any more peas to pick. And then you take your plants and you till them in. You just turn them into your garden. That's the best thing that you can do with your plants. Most vegetables you want to discard and put in your compost pile. Peas are one of the few that you really want to make them work a little further and go into your garden for their nitrogen fixing capabilities. They will build your soil up and really help get nitrogen down there for your next crop that you put in.
It says it gives a 10% average boost for the next crop. Let's say if you till the peas with your soil, it will be a slow release fertilizer, that nitrogen, and then your next crop will have 10% more for you to harvest.
So we didn't talk about rotation, but that's a good story right there for rotation. The next crop you want to put in, put something else there that can use that healthy soil that the peas have left and put the peas somewhere else the next year.
The only time I would not recommend tilling the peas in is if you notice a disease. Sometimes there are different diseases on peas. Sometimes they climb up, so you see the lower leaves dying up. Not the natural senescence, not the natural death, but you see something weird, or your pods have brown spots or mildews in it. So you gotta take a step back and think, like, will I till it in? And then I'm going to incorporate maybe pathogens in the soil. So that's the only caution. But if it looks good, if it tastes good, throw them in under.
That's one of the questions we got. Are any particular diseases we need to worry about? Are they regional, or is there a disease that's specific to peas?
Yeah, I'm gonna follow on that too first. There's yes, every plant that we work has a different disease package, susceptibility, resistance to several things. So catalog is your number one source of information. And then nature, like Diane said, it keeps changing on us. 1 year is hot and the other is not. The main common disease that we look related to overwatering. You know, if you have too much water is a factor that some disease will come, like rots, root rots, or mildews. So just giving the right amount of water, or for people in containers, we lift the container and see, you know, how much moisture is in there, or we can touch the surface. So you don't want to overwater because that's, you know, will trigger different kinds of disease. Like again, powdery mildew, downy mildew, Fusarium root rot, Phenomyces root rot. So all these pathogens, they require a lot of water, the right amount of temperature too. But if you manage well your pots, don't overwater it, you should be good. That's my main opinion. And if you see like, oh, my garden is overwatered, what do I do? Just skip watering, or maybe people sometimes they're out their soil. They come with a hole there and you know, break some more ground, just the water can go to a different direction. So I don't know any other inputs, Janine and Heather, you have more experience, you know, looking at these crops.
Yeah, I think air movement's really important, especially when you get into a home garden situation where we tend to cram things in. And just especially for these cool season crops, the air movement really helps with that disease control, that you're not creating conditions that are conducive to the disease just by having the air move around. So that's helpful.
Yeah, that's good. So here's a question about sweet peas instead of just peas. Now, you guys are the pea experts, so tell me if you can answer this one. Do sweet peas add nitrogen to the soil similarly to how edible peas do?
That is an
Yes.
excellent question. I would assume so based on their both being legumes, right? Is that correct, Ellie?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, they do. They do a good job too.
But don't eat them. That's what the other thing I know for sure is
Yeah.
the sweet peas are poisonous, I believe.
Yeah,
So
harvest
I
them for
don't
the
put them,
flowers.
yeah, I put those in a separate area of my yard so that nobody wanders through and eats the pods.
That's a
just
good topic. It can cause a lot of confusion, you know, like sweet peas always have sweet peas, but it's ornamental, right? So it's just, yeah, it's good to know they're not edible.
Yeah, the fragrance of them is so sweet. You know? Yeah. As soon as like you said sweet peas, I just had a memory of how beautiful and how fragrant they are. They do add a lot of joy to the garden in the early spring too.
Yeah.
So we just posted a link to our Shop Our Members page because our panelists have mentioned several times, like, you know, read the catalog, read the website. All of our members are very good seed retailers that are buying from our panelists. So when you go to their websites, you're going to be able to get a lot of this information from them. So now with just a few minutes left, I'm basically going to ask you two questions. One of them might be a multi-part question. So I want each one of you to just kind of close out with your top advice about growing peas, and then also your favorite variety. Now, I have a feeling you're going to say, well, my favorite shelling is this, my favorite snow pea is this, and my favorite, you know, snap pea is this. So let's start with our panelists with a tip and your favorites. And don't be bashful.
I think for me it's just my tip would be don't be afraid to play with the peas. You know, just do it. Just go out there and give it a shot, give it a try. Try many varieties. I mean, you'll find that you have different varieties for different purposes, and some varieties are great for eating fresh. There's other varieties that are good for freezing for later on, you know, even a snap pea. So it just depends on what you want to do culinary wise with that pea, but don't be afraid to experiment. My favorite variety, I've been putting Snack Hero in my garden is one of our varieties. It's an AAS winner. It deserves to be an AAS winner. What's interesting about that variety, it's a little bit elongated. It looks like a green bean, but tastes like a pea. But the thought process on it when they developed it was a lot of times when you hold a handful of snap peas, they tend to fall out. But with that elongated pea pod, they're easier to handle when you're bringing them in from the garden.
Awesome. a little kudos there for the AS winner. I love that one. I really do. It was
You never go wrong with an AS winner.
yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay, who's next?
So sugar snap peas are my favorite for sure, and they don't make it in the house. So I plant these specifically just for snacks. There's things I have in my garden that are just snacks while I'm out there working, and sugar snap peas would be one of them. My tip is to make sure you're buying fresh seed. You know, some seeds you can keep for many years and they just keep growing and whatever, have a very long shelf life. Peas don't have the same long shelf life. So be sure that you're refreshing your inventory there and keeping track. The packet should have a date on it and you want to pay attention to that because the fresher seed's going to germinate better for you.
Good tip. We get that question a lot. Like, what is the life? You know, if I put them in my fridge and, you know, store them right, how long will they last? So that's good to know. The peas are some of the more perishable ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Ellie.
Wow, what a responsibility. I'm the last one to give tips here. So peas, just to close the germination thing, if we start right, a variety can last for more than 2 decades. You know, I have seeds that still germinate, but germination drops every year. So Heather is right on that. My favorite variety right now is a purple snow that we develop here. And because purple color means anthocyanin, which is an antioxidant, which it fights, you know, bad stuff in your body. So you need anthocyanins. And this one doesn't have such a bitter taste. So sometimes a purple thing will have a bitter taste when we talk about legumes, but we develop a purple snow. So check it out. It's experimental. We are pre-commercial now, my team will say, but eventually it'll be out there for you to look. And my top advice from science background, I would say play with it. Make your garden so colorful. There's so many colors of peas that are edible, that are used for research. So you can become a researcher just by planting 2 different types of peas and looking at maturity, at details, and all the things it attracts. So it generates beauty as well on top of health. So by having peas in your garden and eating them, you contribute to your own health and for the soil health because it's inputting nitrogen back in the soil. So thank you so much for inviting me for this panel.
Well, thank you to everyone. I love this. It's so funny, you know, when we said it was the year of the pea, I think some people might have been like, peas, you know, but I knew it. I knew we would get you panelists on here. I knew the questions would be wonderful. And now it's just like, I got to go plant more peas. It's really fun. And I've got to plant like probably 3 times as much as I think I need because I'm going to be like all of you and just eating them straight from the garden. So awesome job, everybody. We're super excited about peas this year. Hey, if you're growing peas, post them on social media and tag National Garden Bureau, tag us, hashtag Year of the Pea or something, because we want to see your successes. I know there's going to be a lot. So with that, Janine, Heather, Ellie, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your opinions and your insights and your experience. This was really good, really fun. And thank you to all of attendees. We'll do some follow-up emails as well. And with that, happy gardening, everybody.